Alrighty, with that, I'll introduce Vicki Mandel King, who will introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everybody. On the board, we always talk about what speakers we should have here, what topics we should cover, and as most of you know, we have a range of speakers going from the practical to how do you fill out advance directives and what else do you need to have completed so that your paperwork is in order. Or we'll have a dramatic presentation about a family going through the dying of a loved one. Or we'll have topics like Ray mentioned are coming up. But today's talk really goes to the heart of this, I think, in terms of what Compassion and Choices is trying to achieve as far as educating people about their choices as they approach dying, and in terms of making options more available for people. And so what the talk today really covers is that culture that we have that denies death. The difficulty people have, maybe because of how the strides of science and medicine, that we've been able to push death further away and just keep thinking that we can keep healing and avoid the D word. Whereas, for example, my mother-in-law has been wanting to die for years in a nursing home, and she'll say to me as I walk in, "Hi dear, I'm not dead yet," or something like that. So we just bandy about the D word, and probably most of us, we're more comfortable with it. And so I think for us as an organization, how do we reach the people who are not already in these seats, who don't want to talk about death? How do we reach them? And what we're hoping today is that Lynn Weitzel's talk will be a start for that as she explores the taboos about death in our society and what we can do as a community for ourselves to be comfortable with what will happen to us all and how we can help one another. Lynn Weitzel, our speaker today, has long been involved in this area of life, the dying part. She is now a retired hospice nurse and has had a long and rich career with that. But now she takes all that experience and volunteers with hospice and volunteers with Compassion and Choices in helping people deal with their approaches to death. So it's with great pleasure that I ask you to welcome Lynn Weitzel today. Hi, Lynn.
I have to get my glasses out. Good morning, everybody.
The mic.
Sorry. Get this up here where it works. I know that speaking to Compassion and Choices members about death is kind of like preaching to the choir. We all are familiar with the idea, but I'm going to try to shine a little bit of different light on the subject this morning. First, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. Okay, there are about 35 of you here today. How many of you have been present at what you would consider a good death? About 9. I'm going to write down numbers. Maybe I won't, I don't have a pen.
Here's
Thank you. Just because I'm keeping records for other talks. Thank you. How many of those good deaths were in an ICU? 1? 2, okay. How many were in a hospital? How about a care center? How many were with hospice care? Okay. And how many were in the person's home?
With hospice.
Okay, with hospice care or just at home? Yeah. Okay. And did any of those people choose aid in dying? Aid in dying?
Yeah.
One?
When did you define that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, according to the Oregon law, that means that they took a prescription that would help them die quickly?
No.
No, okay. I figured not. Now, the big question is, what is a good death? Most Americans define a good death as having lived a long life and dying suddenly. I'm here to tell you those are 99% mutually exclusive. If you live a long life, you are most likely going to die of a chronic degenerative disease, the prolonged treatment of which would preclude that definition of a good death. And I'm looking at the fact that my grandparents, all 4 of them, lived past 88. My mother and dad lived to be 93 and 98. So I've got a long time to go yet, unless something happens out of the ordinary. My mother died last year, just short of 98, and although her health was not good, she lived in her own apartment. She was creative and enjoyed her time, played bridge a lot, and she was ready to go, having, with my urging, planned well for her dying. I would call her death a good one because it was on her terms, but she definitely had a long life and not a sudden or quick death. She knew when she was going to die, I believe, because she made cards, greeting cards, and they were exquisite cards. She used antique lace, she used origami, she had done decoupage for a long time, and she cut out decoupage angels and other things, flowers, and used them with the lace and other things. She sold her cards for $7.50 a piece at a local store in Bethesda, Maryland. On the night that she died, she had laid out a card she was going to put together the next day, she thought, maybe. I don't know, nobody was there. But it was a card with antique lace laid out over the card stock and a decoupage angel laid on top of the card. She died in her sleep. We don't know if she was there or not, whether she was just sleeping and died. But in her terms, that was a good death. ICUs, hospitals, and care centers are places where good deaths are fairly rare. This is because those many cultures look at death as a failure. They allow death to occur only after every medical intervention has been tried and failed. These are some statistics from the SUPPORT study. SUPPORT means study to understand the prognoses and preferences for outcomes and risks of treatment. And it was 9,000 patients with life-threatening diseases at 5 different hospitals. 2 Gallup polls have stated that 90% of Americans want to die at home. That's where they would prefer to die. The fact is, 80% die in hospitals or other organizations, rehab centers, nursing homes, assisted living. About 40% of those who are hospitalized spend 10 or more days in the ICU with tubes, monitors, bright lights, frequent intrusions, a specialist MD, limited family visits, loved ones disempowered and distanced, a very dehumanizing and demeaning prolonging of the death itself. 50% are conscious prior to death, and 50% of them are in moderate to severe pain most of the time. 25% died with their arms lashed down at their sides to keep them from pulling out the tubes. Only 14% of those patients, 9,000 people, had any advance directives or medical durable power of attorney. And in most cases, those documents were ineffectual in shaping care because they were this document. You've probably seen this. It's totally ineffective. Only 25% of people die with hospice care, and that is up from 15% in 2001. But that has become often brink of death care, the last hours of life. I was at Family Hospice on Thursday here in Boulder talking with them, and during the time that I was there, the staff was given notice that a person who had signed on the afternoon before had died. This was at 10 o'clock in the morning. The value of hospice services is almost totally lost with less than 1 day of care. These statistics show why we have so many bad deaths in America. Why are they relevant? Because we have a death-phobic society. We have an aversion to talking about death because we think it is too sad. Because our experiences with death are heart-wrenching, painful, and frustrating. We think it's fearful because illness, disease process, loss of control, loss of independence, pain, and loss of the person that we love are fearful propositions to us. We experience spiritual angst. We don't really know what happens to us when we die. We believe certain things, but nobody really knows. The subject is actually taboo in America. The attitude is talk about anything but dying, with a dying person. We don't even call it dying. We say people have passed on. We say that a person has passed. Passed what? The final exam? We live with denial and false hope. Medical doctors, family, friends, patients themselves, and even the palliative or comfort caregivers try to hide the fact that someone is dying. We don't address the elephant in the room. Instead, we pretend everything is normal when it's far from that. Finally, we have created an illusion of immortality. We believe that we control our lives and our deaths. We try to hold off death through prevention. All the health trends, vitamins, food fads, diet fads, exercise fads. We've changed our attitude about old age. We used to revere and value older people's wisdom. Now we show disdain for physical aging and becoming infirm. We think if we can look young, we are young. Hence the big business of facelifts, anti-aging surgeries, creams, potions, nips and tucks. We have developed a blind faith that medicine will keep us going despite all evidence to the contrary. I don't think there's a person in this room that doesn't believe that they're going to die one day. It's a given. The bottom line is, because we won't talk about death, we have ceded control of it to the doctors, hospitals, and caregiving institutions. We have hidden it away, and many of us don't even visit it when people are dying in those situations. It's my belief that only through talking about dying, embracing its inevitability, and planning for it, can we truly live our lives. I went to the Compassion and Choices, C&C, convention in Chicago last summer in June. And a man there who was one of the speakers, Stephen Jenkinson from Canada, had an interesting observation. The verb die, or to die, is an active verb. Can anybody here think of a way that you can use the word die as a passive voice? We can't say I was died. We can't say anything that makes die passive. So dying doesn't happen to me. I do it. I can be killed, or I can die. Stephen suggests that the reason death is seen as a failure in North America and parts of Europe is that it has become almost exclusively a biomedical event. We're only concerned about keeping the body alive. The death of the body has become something managed by doctors and clinicians in such a way that when it happens, we are victims and something has killed us. Therefore, we have lost a long and courageous battle. You've seen that in the obituaries. And we failed. We died. It has become the norm to be a passive victim of death and to see it as an executioner. In fact, a huge percentage of people are killed by treatments for their disease or their chronic condition. You've all seen the disclaimers on the TV ads for medications. They're killed by everything from medical errors to adverse drug reactions. I'm going to learn to talk yet. To unnecessary or unwanted procedures. We have been conned into thinking that we must try every medical procedure or option possible to ward off the executioner. But in fact, iatrogenic or hospital-caused events, medical errors, infections picked up in hospitals, and unnecessary procedures are now the #1 killer in the United States. Above cancer, above heart disease, above anything else. I'd suggest we take a different stance in regard to dying. That we look at the dying process not as fending off or giving in to the executioner, but as wrestling with the angel of our death, wrestling until we fall into its arms and die. What does this wrestling require of me? That I think about and talk about my dying now. That I think ahead. That I think long and hard about what it would mean to me to be actively dying. I have to take responsibility for the manner in which I die. I have to think about the losses I fear and what they would mean to my actively taking charge of my dying. Fears of loss of physical functioning, energy, the ability to do activities of interest, daily living with family or friends, the loss of independence of my home, my spouse. It requires talking to family and friends about what my choices are, drawing up the documents that put these choices in writing, and giving copies to doctors and family so that they will know how I want to die. And they don't have to agonize over decisions based on what they think I might have wanted. It means having my doctor fill out a MOST document if I have a chronic progressive disease process and keeping it handy. It means having a DNR form in my home if I do not want to be resuscitated, if my heart stops or I stop breathing. It means thinking about what is most important to me about how I'm treated at the end of my life. what I want done with my body after I've died. Burial, cremation, embalming or not, a green death. I could think about what kind of service or gathering I'd want for those who loved me. It might mean putting together a picture history of my life. It may mean choosing the music that I love that would be used at that gathering. It may mean telling family about friends I would want notified who don't live in my town. It may mean contacting a funeral home or cremation service or a group like Natural Transitions if I want to do a green burial process. It may mean things to you that it doesn't mean to me, and that means exploring each and every one of them. Wrestling with the angel of death means that I am aware that the angel might come to do the final takedown at any time. And having thought through every eventuality I can think of, I still might be surprised at how or when the time comes. It also means that if I have a very long life, I need to be prepared to say enough already. It means that I must have a plan for how I will relax into that angel's arms, or what I would ask someone else to do to help me if I can't do it alone. Another thing that Stephen talked about is how we can create a community around us as we do our dying. I have two favorite stories about creating community that come from my time as a hospice RN. Both ladies were in their homes. I'll call her Jane. She lived in 5 Points in Denver. She had 9 children. She had raised those children by herself, and one of her sons was a minister. She called together the whole family, all 9 kids, their wives, their husbands, grandkids, great-grandkids. She had a bed in the living room, and they all gathered around her, and her son, the preacher, gave a talk about what her life had been and how well she had done in raising 9 children who were all college graduates. This is a black lady who had nothing to start with. Her son talked about all of the things that the children had done, the way that she had helped the grandchildren. And when he finished talking, I'm going to cry. When he finished talking, he said, "Mom, what do you want to do now?" And she said, "Sing my favorite song." It was, "Do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do remember me." And while the family was singing, she died.
Wow.
The other one was a lady who had lung cancer, and she was divorced and had come to live with her sister and brother-in-law. And I had her as a hospice patient for about 5 months. She had lung cancer, and she was a very upbeat lady. She was joking all the time. Her family had lots of jokes about her that I heard. And she decided that she had had enough one day. Now, this was long before the Oregon assisted suicide law or anything like that. We don't call it assisted suicide. Aid in dying. But Shirley decided that she wanted to end it at that point. So she had her brother and sister-in-law call the whole family together for lunch. It was a beautiful summer day. They had lunch out in the backyard, a big picnic. Her brother, her younger brother, who as a child, because he couldn't say Shirley, had called her Shitty, had made a cross with Shitty on it and put it up in the backyard, like for a grave marker. After lunch, she went into her room and she said, "Everybody come in, one or more at a time, and I want to say goodbye to you personally." So they did that over the course of about an hour. And then after everybody had said goodbye, she took off her oxygen and died within 15 minutes. In both cases, these ladies made their dying process a good memory for their families. They provided an example of dying, not of being killed by their disease. They gathered family around them, laughed and talked with them, and then fell into their angel's arms. They knew it was time to go. They stopped wrestling. They relaxed. Even the great-grandchildren will remember their examples when it comes time to do their own dying. And this is what Stephen was talking about. If we can create a good death, a truly good death that creates community, then people who come after us have an example to go by that's not the medical model. Most American deaths, 80% in institutions, do not create a village. They happen in restrictive, tension-filled, or impersonal circumstances, and they often leave a very negative impression of death with family members and friends. Even in these situations, however, there can be a good death. I remember one in particular at an assisted living center. She was, I don't remember what disease she was dealing with, but she was at the point where she was ready to die, but she didn't know how. And she said, I keep having this person come in the corner of the room up there and tell me to come with him, but I don't know who he is. I don't know, I don't want to go with him because I don't know where he's going to take me. And I said, well, do you know what his name is? And she said, well, he says he's John, but I don't know any John that, I would go with. So I talked with her daughters later, and they said that she had had a son who had died 2 days after childbirth, and he had been named John. So the daughters went in and talked to her and had her ask him if he was her son. And he said he was. So she went with him the next night. Another took place at a care center in circumstances that started out not to be at all good. Barbara knew that death was her executioner. She was absolutely convinced, being an old-time Catholic, that she was going to go to hell because she had not been a good enough person. No matter what she did, she couldn't have been good enough. So we didn't know that at the time, but she was hanging on way beyond where, it was logical that she would be hanging on. And finally one day when I was there, I said, is there something that's holding you back? And she said, I know I'm going to go to hell. And I said, well, why do you think that? And she told me that she had had difficult things happen in her life and she probably hadn't handled them well enough. And rather than do the, well, I'm sure you've been good enough thing, I said, is there something more about it? And she said, yes, I'm sure that I'm going to see my husband again because he's going to hell. He went to hell for sure. Apparently he had beat her all the time, and she wanted nothing of seeing him again. So by having the hospice chaplain and social worker come in and talk with her family, having her priest come in and talk with her, we finally set her mind at rest, and she was able to go and have a death that was much easier on her children than it would have been otherwise. Now, some people, like Shirley, want to die with family present. They set up circumstances where family is prepared and no one is hanging on to them and saying, don't die, don't die. Where they feel free to relax into their angel's arms. Other people are very private and don't want anyone around. My mother was one. She was an extremely private and proper lady. She didn't want anybody to ever see her in any situation she would consider compromising. In other words, she didn't have her makeup on, her dress, her stockings, her high heels, the works. So she died in her sleep. No one was present as far as we know. Maybe not even her. Another situation was one in a care center where there were 17 members of the family gathered in the room doing death watch. And the woman, Josie, was very little in consciousness. She was mostly out. But they had been told that they could say what they wanted to her, and hearing is the last thing to go, and all those words. So they were sitting around talking and sharing stories about her life and stuff. And this went on for several days. There was somebody there all the time. And the afternoon that I came in, that there were 17 of them, it was the third day of nobody ever leaving. And I said, look, maybe she needs some time alone. So 16 of them decided that they would go out to dinner and one would stay. And while she went to the bathroom, the lady died. She wanted to be alone. So one of the things that I have to do in thinking about wrestling with my angel is let my family know that I might want someone there. Or that if I haven't died in a long, long time, maybe they better leave me alone. One of the things that holds family back from leaving someone alone is that they feel guilt about not being there at the moment of death. And telling them that they don't need to feel guilty, that if I die alone, that's what I've chosen. Now I'd like to say a few words about hospice and the American way of death. And some of this comes from Stephen too. Of course, the purpose of hospice and the hospice team is to create the circumstances for a good death. They provide comfort or palliative care, but most of them also are caught up in the whole death-phobic societal way of talking about death. First, think about the word palliative. What's the root of the word? Pall, P-A-L-L, pall. Webster says it comes from the Latin and means a cover for a coffin, or any covering that darkens or obscures. Palliate means to cloak, to make something seem less serious, to extenuate or excuse, and more recently, to make less severe without curing, to mitigate or to alleviate. In our society, palliation has come to mean helping people hide from their dying, covering or obscuring by helping them cope with the symptoms of their disease, providing hope that things will be better, and giving them dope to sedate them when they can no longer deal with the anxiety of the executioner's approach. Cope, hope, and dope. And there's the word comfort. Something that provides comfort to an ill person is something that's familiar. Not a new way of looking at things. Not a new hospital bed in the living room. Comfort is chicken soup, chocolate chip cookies. Comfort is being kept clean and warm. Comfort is having family nearby. Comfort and palliation are not being asked to die, to do dying. Cope, hope, and dope. When hospice is called in the last day or two of a person's life, there is no time to do anything but the cope, hope, dope routine. Make sure that pain is controlled, anxiety is controlled, and the family can hope that the death will occur without the person's active participation, because they wouldn't know how to handle that. If hospice is called in months or even weeks before a person's death, they can offer spiritual and psychosocial counseling along with symptom palliation. They can also, if they're prepared to go beyond the cope-hope-dope routine, which many of them are not, ask the person what their understanding of what is going on is. And if they say they know they're dying, talk with them about what that means to them, what they want to create, what they want to say to family members or friends, who they need to make amends to, and what memories they want to leave behind. Hospice can also be legally supportive of a patient who chooses to do VSED or stop taking medications or treatments that support organ function. It is totally legal for any patient to refuse treatment, including food and drink. Hospices are aware of the death with dignity laws, and some want to cooperate with Compassion and Choices in helping people who want to do their dying. Others, especially those tied to certain religious belief systems, say that even food and drink are required medical care and will not collaborate in allowing a patient to die. So I'm going to talk a little bit about advance directives, and I know you're going to hear about that next week, but I think I might have a little different take on it, having been a hospice nurse. So let's say you do your advance directives. You've completed your medical durable power of attorney and your living will. You take the paperwork home and put it in a safe deposit box or a desk drawer, along with your financial will. Do you think your wishes will be followed? Here are some reasons that advanced directives fail. Your medical doctor is unaware of the paperwork, and it has not been discussed with him or her. A study of 4,804 patients showed that only 22 had advance directives, specifically addressing the patient's current condition, and half of them received unwanted care because the patient had not told the doctor how to carry out their wishes. Let's say your spouse has been named as your MDPOA. That's common, but it's often not a good idea. Oftentimes, the spouse doesn't feel that they can carry out your wishes. They don't say anything, and they don't refer to the paperwork when you're nearing death, preferring to defer to their own choices. Your spouse and or all of your children do not know about your directives because you've not had the hard conversations with all the details about specific health conditions, your wishes in various scenarios, and your values regarding the quantity of life versus the quality of life. An argument ensues at the bedside, and the loudest voice wins, with others feeling angry and resentful. And standard lawyers or hospitals' living wills and directives like these make one statement. In the event that the only procedure that I am being provided is artificial nourishment, I direct that one of the following actions be taken. Keep it going, do it for so many days, or stop it. That's it. With that distinct expansion and regular updating of these directives, they probably won't address the current state of affairs in which you find yourself. For an example, my own living will includes a declaration of what is of value to me and my choices in instances that may occur, including my right to refuse food and water, oxygen, and medications that may be sustaining organ function. It defines what I would want in the case of severe pain. It states that I would not want antibiotics used in certain cases. It states that if I cannot make decisions for myself, under no conditions do I want any life support measures. It states that I do not want to go to a hospital, nursing home, or any other place, but remain in my own home. It states that if cancer is suspected, and you all realize that these don't take effect until I can't make decisions for myself. So if cancer is suspected, I don't want diagnostic procedures, exploratory or palliative surgery, chemo, radiation, or anything. I don't want tube or IV feedings or hydration. I don't want a respirator, dialysis, blood or plasma replacement, no steroid therapy, no CPR, no interventions to prolong my dying, because at that point they would not be giving me more life, they would only be unnaturally prolonging my death. My living will draws on the papers on the Compassion and Choices website for the state of Colorado, their values declaration, and on my own experiences with hospice patients. Mostly, I would say, did not have a good death. It also includes the Compassion and Choices dementia provision, the sectarian health care directive, a letter to my primary care physician, and an organ donation form. I have given an original copy of my living will, signed in blue ink, so there's no question, to each of my 3 sons, who are my primary and alternate MDPOAs, so that there's never a question of anything being altered. I have taken an original copy to my medical doctor and talked with him about my choices. He was amazed. He said, we don't even bring up the subject with people until they're at least 75. I carry a card in my wallet that says, in an emergency, call my 3 sons, who each have a copy of my MDPOA and living will. Because in doing advance directives, there is no lawyer involved, there doesn't have to be, there's no cost, and the only people who need to sign the advance directive are me and 2 witnesses, not even a notary. I can review and revise the papers every time new medical conditions or external circumstances arise, and I do review them every year and give new copies to my sons and my doctor if I do revise it. If I get to the point that a medical condition requires physician contact on a regular basis, I will have my doctor fill out the most papers, which was authorized in Colorado last year, the medical orders for scope of treatment at the end of life, and have it handy in the unlikely event for me that I go to a hospital. I have had patients with my volunteering with Compassion and Choices who have chosen to stop eating and drinking. They have talked with their families. They have overcome huge opposition in some cases, and they have done it. And it has been a very calm and peaceful way to die, and to die on their terms. They've taken responsibility for their dying. 5 of those patients had ALS. And I don't know if you're familiar with the end stages of ALS, but it is not a pretty sight. And each of them decided that at the point when they could no longer talk and had no ability to contact or interact with other people in what they called a quality way, that they would stop eating and drinking. The literature says that that takes up to 3 weeks. And I don't know if you've seen the movie that Compassion and Choices hands around about the doctor who decides to stop eating and drinking. Yeah, okay. He took a long time. In the 6 or 7 cases that I've had, I haven't had anybody last more than 5.5 days. And in every case, the person was a little hungry the first day, but because they hadn't been eating much and they were not doing any physical activity, they weren't hungry. They were thirsty at first, But by not giving ice chips or anything that was water, we didn't prolong the process. We used wet washcloths just to moisten their lips, but not give them any water or those swab things. Some people don't like the taste of those. But in each case, even the nurse who had been a surgical nurse and her husband was a doctor, he was the one who fought her doing this. And he said finally, at the end, he said finally, I'm not going to fight you about it, but I will not support you. Because I don't think you should do this. He was of the opinion that we should all stay alive forever. Her 2 daughters came and took care of her, and all the care she needed was being turned a little bit once in a while when she got uncomfortable. She had bad arthritis. So 5.5 days later, she was gone. And she had a peaceful death. Family came and talked to her, you know. She chose the way she wanted to go, and she was the director of the whole process. I have had one bad instance with a stopping eating and drinking because there was a lot of pain involved. And the person wanted to start the process on Friday. And I tried to ask her to wait until Monday because then her regular hospice nurse would be with her. But she wanted to do it on Friday, so she had been taking medication by mouth for her pain. So we put her on fentanyl patches. I didn't, the hospice did. And for some reason, unknown to me, the hospice put her on a child's patch, a 25 microgram patch, when she was taking enough to warrant a 100 microgram patch at least in pain medication. So she stopped eating and drinking and had this little bitty baby patch on, and it did not control her pain. So she got a bigger patch on Saturday, she got a bigger patch on Sunday, but it takes 24 hours for these things to build up in your system. So she should have been taking her medicine by mouth on Friday when she had the little patch put on, but she quit. So the pain built up and built up. And finally on Sunday night, they got the 100 microgram patch, and by Monday she was comfortable, and she died on Tuesday. Better management of things like that needs to be done, and hospices certainly need to know what the equivalent of pain medication is in a different kind of medication. Another interesting case I had was a man who was a psychologist, and he had decided to do VSED. And his wife did not want him to die at home. She wanted no part of his body, or a dead body, being in her house. And it took a lot of counseling with her and bringing in the hospice chaplain and other people to explain to her that, you know, a dead body is no different from a human body asleep. It's just a body. And that, you know, we will come and deal with the body. You don't have to touch it. You don't have to do anything. So finally she agreed that she would let him do it at home. And his children came and helped with the process. And it turned out to be fine. And by the time that he died, she had changed her mind about the whole process and about how he was going to be when he died. I've planned my dying time, similar to how I planned for the births of my sons. I can sit back now and enjoy the pregnancy, enjoy the rest of my life, knowing that I have planned for every eventuality that I can. I live each day as though I could die, and go gracefully, having created a community of family and friends who will support me in my choices. Of course, there's a possibility that it could all go up in smoke, that I'm killed in a car wreck on the way home this afternoon. But I don't choose to dwell on that because I have no control over that. I have done what I can, thought through what I want my dying to be like, and because of that, I believe my death won't be a failure. Thank you. And I'd be willing to answer questions. Yes?
That pamphlet that you held up, that yellow one?
Yes.
Is that the only thing in there that you don't agree with what you read?
It's not that I don't agree with it. It's that's all there is.
Are there other things in that pamphlet that you would say don't use this because of, or is that basically the reason?
Now, on the medical durable power of attorney page, there is a small space here for desires concerning life-prolonging care, treatment, services, and procedures, and the special provisions and limitations that they give you 2 lines to write out what you want. I don't think that's enough.
All those things that you listed that you have, those are on the Compassion and Choices website?
On the values inventory on Compassion and Choices, they talk about each of those things. You know, would you want antibiotics? Should you have renal failure at the end of life? Would you want all those different things? So using those questions as a guide point is how I came up with all of the stipulations that I have in mind.
So the 5 wishes does not list all of them?
No, and as a matter of fact, be careful of the 5 wishes. Number 2 has no place to check yes or no.
Yeah, I crossed that one out.
Okay, so you knew about that.
And initialed it. Yeah, I was told
That form, or that values evaluation, was made up by the Catholic Church. And number 2 states that you do not want anything done to hasten your death. And there's no way to check to say, no, I don't want that. So you either have to cross it out like you did, or everything in there can be overridden by that number 2 that you didn't get to say anything about.
Which form is that?
The 5 wishes.
Is that, what's
Yes.
the title of that yellow pamphlet?
It's called Your Right to Make Healthcare Decisions.
Okay, that is an old, antiquated version, and I know this because I'm the guy who designed its
Oh.
replacement. By
Good.
which I mean, I didn't write it. Jennifer Ballantyne wrote it.
Okay.
So I laid it out and designed it. So there's a new one. It's blue. It has the same title, and it's bigger.
Good.
It has a suite of full-sized forms in it, and it does not have a most form in it, but it does discuss most and points readers to the most website.
Very good.
So it's still not as
I'll repeat it.
What I want to do is have this recorded,
got it.
so if you can either get up here or have you repeat it so the video
Okay.
audience can
Okay.
hear that.
Yeah. I'll repeat some of what you said already, is that you designed a new form, a blue form similar to this, that is your right to make healthcare decisions.
Right. There's a replacement for this old small yellow pamphlet that's at all the hospitals, and I don't know if it's migrated out to all the hospitals yet, but they are aware of it because the Hospital Association paid for it. And it folds to 8.5 by 5.5, and it's meant when the forms, and that's because when the forms unfold, they're full letter sized. And they're printed with green borders on the original so that if they're used and put in your chart, the staff knows it because they have that lime green border on them. So it's a redone, updated version of this yellow thing that's more readable, it's updated, and again, it does not have the Colorado Most form in it, but it does refer to the Most website where people can go and obtain that for themselves.
Where do you get it at? Where do you get the form?
Well, I don't know. You would think that every hospital has them, but I think they have to buy them, and how long it takes. Now, we did this a year ago, so yeah, I think it was pretty much a year ago.
What is it called again?
It's the same name.
Yeah.
Your Right to
say
Make
the
Healthcare
name so
Decisions.
you have it recorded.
The name of this brochure is Your Right to Make Healthcare Decisions. And the author of the new form is Jennifer Ballantyne, who's involved in
It's the Life Quality Institute.
yeah, she's the executive director of the Life Quality Institute, but she's also the co-author of the most legislation, and she's wrapped up in the consortium. I forget the proper name of it.
Great.
Cool.
I'm glad to hear that. Other questions?
What is the most website? Do you know that?
Do you know, I don't know. I'm sure if you went, just Google most, M-O-S-T,
Well, Google Colorado most.
Colorado most, right? Yeah, because it's pulsed in some other states.
But you can't pull the blue form up through that most website. There's no way to get that except through a hospital?
Oh, no, you can get
Oh.
the form from the website.
You can get the most
Oh,
form
yeah.
from the website,
No,
yes.
The blue form that you're referring to.
No, you
No.
have to get it from a hospital, I think.
There's some in doctor's offices.
Yeah, some
So
doctor's
is that-
offices and some hospitals are, I would imagine the hospitals are probably using these up before they buy the new ones.
So is that blue form the standard form that people should be generally using? Is that?
Well, first of all, it's a brochure.
Okay.
It's many pages, and it includes, there's a DNR in there, there's a medical power of attorney in there, and one, I can't think offhand which other forms are in it. You know, I'm going to run out to my car. It's possible, I don't know, but I may have one. I'm going to go out and check.
Okay.
Well, I guess my question with that is there a reason why that blue form is only through hospitals and isn't through like a website like Compassion and Choices?
Because Compassion and Choices has developed their own forms that are more comprehensive
Oh, I see. Okay.
and have a lot more questions in them for you to answer and think about, to wrestle
Okay,
with your angel.
So in your opinion, if you were going to fill any out, you should probably go to Compassion and Choices versus doing that? Going
I
to
would.
that blue form? Okay, that's
I
what I'm
would.
getting at. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that the best thing you can do is to go to the Compassion and Choices website. They will have a values form there that you can go through, and they will have other forms, and it is particular to each state. So you get to put in that you're in the state of Colorado and do it that way.
Ray, the website is www.coloradoadvanceddirectives.com for the most specific PDF.
So that's
That's for most.
coloradoadvanceddirectives.com.
Colorado Advanced Directives, one word, .com. If you go to that, then you get the forms, the most form.
As a PDF and as an explanation.
Yeah, the other thing about that most form, if you want to print it off yourself, is that, like this gentleman said, the ones in the hospital have a green border around them or are on a specific green paper. It's kind of the color of her jacket back there. And it may not be recognized if it's not on that green paper. So that's why doctor's offices have them, and the doctor has to write it out and sign it. So you can't fill that one out yourself, but you can certainly take it to your doctor and say, I want this. Yes?
Doesn't the most include the DNR? Isn't the DNR part of the most?
The DNR can be a part of the most, but it's a good idea to have the official DNR form in your home.
My doctor gave me the most form when I asked for the DNR,
Okay,
and then we filled it out together.
okay. So the DNR and the most are together.
It's satisfactory, I think.
Yeah. Yes?
You talk about discussing this with your doctor. Nowadays, of course, people have a lot of different doctors. You've got your primary care doctor, and you've got your specialist, and you've got your surgeon, and you got this, and you got that. Do you need to talk to each one? What's the most effective way to get this on record?
The most effective way is generally we have a disease process that is going to be the track to our death. For me, it's lung. So I will talk to my pulmonologist and my primary care. Now, if somebody else's is cardiac, they would talk to their cardiac doctor and their primary care. Or your urologist, or whatever your primary problem is, talk to that doctor and your primary care, because he's the one probably that referred you to the other. Now, the chances are, if you get taken to a hospital, you're going to have a hospitalist be the doctor in charge. So that's the case in which you need to have either that most form going with you to the hospital with your doctor's orders on it, or you need to have somebody there at the hospital with you with your MDPOA and advance directives. Yeah.
They scanned it into the system through the Boulder Community Hospital, but I still don't know that there's a guarantee that when the moment came, it would be available. I'm not going to carry it around in my purse.
Well, no, but, and the other thing is that if something happened to you somewhere other than in Boulder and you didn't get taken to the Boulder Hospital, then it would not be available. You know, we do the best we can.
Yeah.
What about if you assign your daughter or someone in your family to be your advocate and they have those papers, assuming that they will, you know, be available? How do the hospitals, if they see that something, you've signed them and they're all legal and all that, if she's my advocate, will that do it, you know?
It should. It definitely should.
Because as you say, there's the hospitalist and there's this
Right.
and everything.
But if she shows up and says, this is what my mother wanted, this is how I lined it all out, or she lined it all out, so that in this event, we know what she wants done, then they need to follow that.
Oh, good, okay, that's what I
Yeah.
want to know.
The question is, and this is the serious thing, be sure that your MDPOA has a copy that they can pick up and bring. They don't need to go to your house and try to rummage through drawers and find it. Yeah, they should have a copy. Yeah.
I think Bart
Oh,
has something
good.
else here.
Good. It's new.
It is, okay, so this is the redone yellow, I think they used to call this the yellow
Mike.
book.
Yeah.
Mike,
Mike, this is the redone Your Right to Make Healthcare Directives booklet. And in it are 3 of the many forms that we would all want to have. One is a CPR directive, one is a living will, and one is a medical durable power of attorney. Yeah, and you know, 2 things about these forms. One unique aspect to the most form is that it is legal in many different forms, in many different configurations, shall I say, where a lot of these other forms, they have to be they have to have original signatures and like that.
Hold up the document.
Okay,
No, with the,
with the face. Okay, so here we go, so we can get it on video. Okay, so part of the most legislation, as Jennifer told me, is that the most document is legally binding if it's reduced in size, for instance, etc. There's some flexibility, so you could conceivably put it in a wallet or a purse. Secondly, at least my understanding, you know, this is sort of a stopgap. If we're waiting to hit the deck in a hospital to obtain something like this, at least it's there. It's certainly not optimal like we would all want. Okay, and the website cited in here to obtain the most is coloradoadvanceddirectives.com. So there it is.
And in looking at this page that they call a living will, even though there are quite a few things that it looks like you're filling out, this is about life-sustaining procedures being withdrawn or withheld if they have been started. This is about stopping nutrition and hydration if it has been started. This is about what to do in a persistent vegetative state, and that life-sustaining procedures be withdrawn and or withheld. This is about nutrition in a vegetative state and by tube. And then if you have attached to this form any other instructions for your care, then you include them with this. But again, this is basically what the yellow form was with more questions. So it is not complete. It does not address your particular situation unless you happen to be in a coma in a vegetative state and have already had all that stuff started. And in my case, I don't want it started. So, any more questions? Yeah.
I just wondered if there's any move to have legislation actually make it mandatory that people, through their primary care physician, no matter their age, are filling these out. Because I think it seems like a lot of younger people who let them fill this out, because of course, you know, they're not thinking of it, are stuck in these horrible situations because they're vegetative or whatever.
Mhm.
So it seems like legislation to make sure that physicians say, you know, you have to fill these forms out so we know what the situation is. Here's a workshop you can go to, so that everyone has these forms.
Yeah, the question is, do we need legislation to have everybody fill out these forms? And doctors offer this to everybody that they treat, so that people have something in writing when it comes time, an accident or whatever happens. I'm not sure that we're ready for that kind of legislation yet, unfortunately.
We'll get there eventually.
We will get there. 3 states now have death with dignity laws. Idaho did not pass theirs a couple of years ago. Massachusetts failed by a few votes this time. It was like they rounded it to 49 to 51% against, but it was really not, I mean, it was more like 49.6 to 50.4. So, and that was strictly because the Catholic Church poured millions of dollars into ads, fear ads, at the last minute. I'm really surprised that they picked Massachusetts as a state to try this in, and I'm amazed that it came that close, just because it is so highly Catholic. But New Mexico apparently is going to be the next state that they're going to try to get a law passed. Colorado's going to be difficult.
Did Vermont pass? Because I know they were working. Vermont?
Do you know, I haven't heard about Vermont yet.
Montana.
Oregon, Washington, and Montana. And Hawaii, interestingly enough, because a lot of their laws go back to before they were a state, and they have kept a lot of the laws. One of their laws states that people can refuse anything they want, and that assisted dying is not something that we don't do. So the old Hawaiian tribal concepts are still in place there. So Hawaii basically has a death with dignity law without having a law. It's just in the culture.
Can you say a little more about New Mexico? What do you know about it?
Well, all I know so far is that New Mexico apparently is the next place that Compassion and Choice is going to focus attention. I would imagine they'll come back to Massachusetts at some point. Whether they'll have enough money to fight the big guns, I don't know. But apparently New Mexico is a place that they think that they can get it passed. Yeah.
It's just an interesting perception. The labor of this talk has been kind of about how to fight hospitals when they're supposed to be the ones caring for us. So I imagine that in Europe or in other countries, this is common. Ultimately, and I don't get any medical care, and I haven't for many years. So even people that I don't have a primary doctor or any specialist or anything. So just people off the street or anybody, it seems like should have access to being able to make the choices. And then the other thing would be, I wonder if, as the body breaks down, there's different systems are all in conflict with each other, and there's a natural process, probably in days of old when we didn't have all of the intervention. And I wonder if there's any kind of modeling that's going to be done that will determine, well, this system could use a little boost, potentially, like for a kidney infection. And if there's a way that even if you're incapacitated and couldn't make a decision about something, that it would be determinable that, yeah, this person could have a little longer life if they had this minor intervention without completely cutting off interventions.
Okay, the question is there a way for people who don't have a doctor, a medical person involved. Is there a way to, in case of a minor type of thing, but where you're still incapacitated enough that you can't make decisions for yourself? I think the hospital would probably make the determination that it would work in that, it would work with that particular infection or whatever and take care of it. You know, in nursing homes, for instance, people who have Alzheimer's, they don't die of Alzheimer's. They die of either a renal infection or pneumonia because they aspirate food into their lungs. So they treat the pneumonia with antibiotics. They treat the renal infection with antibiotics over and over and over until the antibiotics don't work anymore, and then the person finally dies. But in a case where there's just one infection, treating it is fine if you expect to have some life out of it.
Yeah.
And you know, if you don't have advanced directives or anything, they're going to treat it. Yeah.
As she was starting to do, getting back to our culture, and my own experience with my mother, she was in a nursing home for the last 6 months. The nursing home staff job was to keep her alive and keep her as well as she could be and as comfortable as she could be. And even when hospice got involved and said she doesn't want to eat, don't feed her, the caregivers would still sneak her that Ensure.
Yes.
And because it's contrary to their point of view. So I'm wondering how much training people get, nursing training and caregivers training, can we help them make that switch a little easier so there isn't this fight going on, you know?
Yes. The conflict between caregivers in institutions and a person's ability to just go ahead and die. When somebody doesn't want to eat or drink, we think love is feeding people. I mean, that's part of our society. If we love somebody, we feed them. If a person has advanced directives in place, they can request that the care center not feed them. But if there is somebody in that care center who believes very strongly that food is a part of care, they'll sneak in and feed them. It's part of the culture. Yeah.
If you got hauled off to a hospital, is there any way people could get you out of there if you didn't want to be there in the first place?
Your power of attorney could.
Oh, I have those.
Yeah, your power of attorney could get you out of the hospital if you got taken and you didn't want to be there.
Disinfect this person, and I'm taking them to their home.
Right.
And the same would go for, say, a care
They would
center.
probably have to sign a waiver that you were
My power of attorney would sign anything that's required.
good.
It's not a family member.
So let's have one final question here. Bart?
You know, it's a thought, and it's sort of way outside our current mission, but it occurs to me that, you know, the likelihood of many of us ending up in some kind of assistive facility, as distinct from our ideal of dying at home, is probably pretty high. And maybe we want a new brand of care facility called Compassion and Choices facility. I'm serious, because we may end up needing facilities, and how about we have some that we can go to that are aligned with the values? I don't know how the finances work out, but wouldn't that solve a lot of problems?
Oh, yeah.
Having care centers that align with Compassion and Choices values would be great. I don't know whether you could get it past Medicare, because their stipulations are that if you're in a nursing home, you don't lose weight. If you're in a nursing home, oh yeah. Nursing homes are called on the carpet if people lose weight on their watch.
This is healthcare industrial complex.
That's right.
Operating.
That's right. It absolutely is. So, yeah, that's a thought though. Maybe we should start a Compassion and Choices healthcare center.
And then you have a positive thing.
Yeah.
That people can do, rather than fighting a negative thing.
Well, it certainly could support VSAD or stopping taking medications and those kinds of things easily.
Does hospice do that? I mean, aren't we?
Do you know some hospices do that and some don't? It depends. A lot of hospices are Catholic. They're going to have everything done to keep you alive as long as you can stay alive. So you need to check, and care centers. I don't know if you all heard the talk that Roland did about, Roland and Rodney did about his parents.
They were here last year.
Yes, okay. They were in an assisted living, and they would not let them stop eating and drinking at the assisted living. They had to move to a home, you know, they had to rent a house so that they could die. That's crazy.
I'd like to just say that, you know, among seniors, there's senior residential, there's assisted living, and then there's the further one, I forget which one.
Nursing home.
Nursing home, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting idea that Bert came up with, because the notion of even our organization, because there are so many other organizations, the Catholics, the Presbyterians, the Jewish Allied, whatever it is, who have senior living.
They do.
There was even a new complex of people who lived in senior residences, being healthy and ambient, you know, graduating.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Somebody build a building. I'll come. If I get to that point. Thank you all so much.